If you've worked with JavaScript before, you're likely aware of undefined and null. These are values that we use to define that a variable or a constant doesn't have a value just yet. Null is used when a value is explicitly empty, and undefined should be used when the value has yet to be determined. With TypeScript, undefined and null are both core types like strings, numbers, and arrays, so we can use them in the same way that we use all of the other types in our project. Let's take a look at how we can use them. Let's start by declaring a variable with each type. As you can see, null must be explicitly assigned null as a value, whereas undefined can remain unassigned. Like I said, we're just using null and undefined in exactly the same way that we use all of the other core types. However, because we've strongly typed both of these values as null and undefined, these are now immutable. That means that they can never be changed from null or undefined because we've strongly typed them to remain that way. So they're doomed to be falsy values forever. Let's see how we can combine this with what we know about union types to make undefined and null a bit more useful. Here's an example of a value that could be a string but begins its life as an undefined value. And here's an example of a similar value, which can be a number or null. Both of these examples can then be checked to see if they have values attached to them in the same way that you would with JavaScript. Alright, let's jump into the editor and take a look at another example of how we can use null and undefined. So if you've used JavaScript before, you're probably familiar with the falsy values, undefined and null. TypeScript has support for these out the box, so let's have a look at how we can use those. So we're going to be working from the same file that we were working on in the previous video, the interfaces.ts file. First and foremost, I'm going to hit Command and J. I'm going to start yarn tsc-w to watch our files, and we are good to go. So working off of the file that we were working in previously, the interfaces.ts file, I'm going to add a new key to my free information interface. I'm going to call it type, and I'm just going to declare it as a string for the time being. In our Apple, we want our type to be, let's say our type is going to be Granny Smith. I'm going to hit save. So that's great. We've added Granny Smith as a type to our Apple, but our orange information and our pair information, we want to keep them the same shape that they are at the moment. So how can we make the type parameter inside of our object optional? And TypeScript actually has a really nice solution for this. We can actually just go to the property in our interface that we want to make optional, and at the end of the name of our key, we can just add a question mark, and I'm going to hit save. And straight away, that has now satisfied the compiler. By adding that question mark, we're telling the compiler that this field may or may not have a value. So I'm just going to go into my free information interface here, and I'm going to add a new property called origin, and I'm going to define it as a union type, which is going to be either string or null. Now let's go back down into my Apple information and add this property in. So our origin for our Apple is going to be the UK. I'm going to hit save there. But for our orange, we don't know where it came from, so we're going to assign it the parameter null. And here, I'm also going to assign it the value null, not parameter, sorry. I'm just going to add some commas there to make sure TypeScript's nice and happy, and hit save. So nice and straightforward. We've added a new parameter to our free information interface, which can either be string or null, and added that key to every single one of our objects. And in exactly the same way that we just used null, we can also add to our union type undefined, and I can run down to my pair, for example, and just set this to undefined. And with that, that about wraps it up for null and undefined. Again, you're going to be using this a lot inside of your projects as your code base becomes more and more complex. So get familiar with them, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video.